Yes, now bless now, people. Don't forget to rest now. There's ROCKSTEADY at King of the Pit TV. We just listened to Cake for the very first time. The record in particular was Fashion Nugget. Maybe it was their debut, maybe it wasn't. You tell me. All I know is it was released in 1996 and it was recommended on the Patreon by my friend Michael. So thank you very much for that. Where do we start? 14 songs. We've got a broadish spectrum of song length, all the way up until bordering on 6 minutes long for a couple of songs, and all the way to like 2 minutes for others, the shortest one being a crazy 1 minute 21 seconds. And it was an actual song, it wasn't an interlude, it wasn't, filler per se, it was a track, it was a piece of songwriting. At first, listen, don't get me wrong, I think the Strokes came after, right? I mean, the Strokes might have been a band during this time, but I do know that, like, generally they were, known and acknowledged later on. But I got a vibe like what I got with the Strokes. The monotonish, spoken word-ish vocal line. The clarity of the vocals, the enunciation and the pronunciation of the vocals. You tell me which the right word I meant to use was, right? I don't know. The production, somewhat, not amplified to hell and back, which was really good. It was really good. It was nice, calm, open space, yet enough. How do we explain this? So, instrumentally speaking, we weren't listening to a 40-piece orchestra, but we were listening to an act that had a couple of band members additional to what you might get in your standard guitar rock band. Probably about 7-8 different instruments to noodle around with from track to track, and everything had space to breathe. The sound engineering on the record was really good. The tones on the record were really good, like as far as the bass tones and the guitar tones in particular, I was a real big fan of, whilst the vocal line, albeit, relatively somewhat spoken wordy, remained at the forefront, was put in great position to withhold the audacity necessary for me to hear every single syllable with precision. Really good stuff. The drumming was okay. My favourite couple of tunes on this record were ones where the band had a degree of groove. The band can groove when needs be. It's not all the way through the record, but there's a couple of numbers where there's a great groove, and that was my favourite element of the act as far as like the actual cohesion of the band was concerned. The toe tappers. Bassist stole the show on many of occasions, and there were some great riffs. The guitar work was great because it wasn't fancy and virtuoso-esque. You weren't listening to some guy shred. You were listening to a guy who could clearly play a great guitar, could clearly phrase a good lick, could clearly create a good riff without it being egocentric. Without it being so overt that this guy needed, or this woman needed to be in the forefront, everybody played their part very well. Everybody played their part. The brass was nice, although, I'll be real with you. In guitar-based bands, I sort of deem brass instruments or whatnot as a bit fluffy. I could do without them, but this band wouldn't have been the same without the brass section. I'm quite biased against it. I think as far as a member of the band just turning up with that instrument, I think they're better off. Economically speaking, I think a band is better off without. But hey, that's the politics of being in a band. I'm going and expanding my perspective above and beyond the actual product of the music being laid out on record. I'm looking at attending events and performing and so on and so forth. This was a great record. I'm going to give you 2 different ratings and I'm going to meet you in between and give you a finalised result. I was working this out as I was listening to this. Me personally, I'll give this a 7 out of 10 because it's not necessarily a sound that appeals to me directly, but it's a sound that I appreciate. And I think this particular sound has a growable factor. I think as you become more familiar with the record, it would grow on you. I think it's a grower, you know. They're not hitting you with hooks and choruses that stick within the first quarter of a song you listen to, you know. It's a little bit more mature than that. It's a very well mature record and sound and investment into the product. But I want to give it an 8 as far as the actual record is concerned. I think it's a fantastic album. I think it's a fantastic sound. I think there's a great professional value to this. So I'll give it a 7.5. I'll meet you halfway. I thought this was really good. On that note, I'm signing out. Peace.